All right, well, it's 7:30 now, so I'm just going to put up the first part of the PowerPoint here. Oh, admit. Get that out of the way. Okay. Oh, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining me on this last day of September. Now, normally we do this on the first Wednesday of October, but seeing the first Wednesday is the 7th, we thought, let's do it on the last day of September, seeing the first starts tomorrow, and we won't lose a whole bunch of, won't lose a whole week. So my name is Jeff Robertson. The idea of this was to show what we can see in the sky over Edmonton. This was driven by two things. One was when I was a kid and used to go to the QEP for whatever show that they were showing, they would always have a brief section on what you could see that night in the sky, and I was always impressed by this. And the other thing is, particularly in the summer, I hear astronomy columnists on the radio and on TV, and they're definitely from the Toronto area, because they're talking about stuff that we can't either see here, or the times are all wrong. They're telling people to go out in July at 8:30, 9 o'clock and look at such and such a thing. And of course, the sun hasn't set here yet. So we put this together to give a very Edmonton-centric view of the sky. Most of the information I use comes from the Observer's Handbook put out by the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada. If you are a member, you will get one of these in the fall, providing you are a member in good standing. It's chock-a-block full of information. It's hundreds of pages with just about everything you can imagine as far as for the amateur astronomer. Now, what are some of, oh, hang on, I gotta admit this person. Okay, so what are some of the highlights in October? Well, it's the last month of daylight saving time. So some of the things we have to look forward to is we have dark skies at a reasonable hour with semi-reasonable weather. The weather in the last part of September has been just wonderful, and we're hoping it stays that way well into October. As the sky gets dark at night, Jupiter and Saturn are high in the southwest in the early evening. Mars reaches opposition when it's at its brightest. We have two full moons this month. The first one is tomorrow, and the next one is on the last day of the month. And there's also the Orionid meteor shower on October the 21st. Oh, and we have another one waiting. Let's click on it. And I am now going to stop sharing and go to the planetarium section of this, where we'll just look at what's up in the sky. All right, normally I start in the evening sky, but this morning, because we had to take my father-in-law's car in, and he's 90-something, and he didn't really want to get up, and we didn't really want him driving around that early in the morning. My wife and I, well, we took her car over to the dealership, then I drove her over to my in-laws to pick up his car. So I got up extra early this morning, and when I looked out the east window of my house, I could see Venus blazing brightly. And when I went to the other side of the house and looked up west, there was Mars blazing brightly. So two very bright planets greeted me this morning. So we'll start with the morning sky first. And the highlight of the morning sky right now is Venus, and it is in the constellation Leo. I can just zoom in on that. And throughout the month, and I've set the time for 6 o'clock in the morning. Oh, hang on here. Got another person here. I set the time for 6 o'clock in the morning. So if we watch Venus throughout the month, it starts off fairly high up in, like I say, in Leo, and tomorrow and the next day, it comes in conjunction with the bright star Regulus, the heart of the lion, right there. And then throughout the month, it gets lower and lower as the month goes through till we get to the 31st. And it is now moved into Virgo. It is getting a little lower every day throughout the month. Now I'm just going to go back here to the first of the month again. Oops, went too far. Okay, one thing I like about this time of year is if you get up early enough in the morning, and sometimes I'm not a morning person, but sometimes I do get up early, is you can see the stars of the winter sky, and you don't have to stand out and freeze your butt off doing it. And of course, my favorite constellation is Orion the Hunter, striding very high up tomorrow, almost directly due south. Also Taurus, the Pleiades, if you have a telescope, Uranus, and as I mentioned before, Mars is well placed in the morning sky when you get up in the morning. Normally I get up about 6:15, so I can still see Mars and Venus. And tomorrow morning the moon will be just setting a few hours before it becomes full. Now, if we advance through the month again, you can see Mars setting a little closer to sunrise. And I shouldn't have done that. Okay, I'm going to reset here and go to the evening sky. Oh, the program I'm using here is Starry Night, if anyone's wondering. This is version 6. So, okay. So this is, pardon me. This is the sky in the evening tomorrow. We've got in the east, we've got the moon, the full moon rising, Mars very close. The next day, I will click one day forward and you can see that Mars and the moon are extremely close to one another. Let's see if this will work here. So it's 1 1/4 degrees apart. The moon is 1/2 degree in diameter, so roughly 3 full moons apart is how far apart they're going to be. If you have a telescope, you've got Neptune over here in Aquarius, the brightest of the or the biggest of the dwarf planets, Sirius. Sirius is down low in the southeast, and you've got Uranus just below Aries here. And 8:30 in the morning, 8:30 in the evening. I'm sorry. The Pleiades is coming up, which is part of the constellation Taurus, but it precedes the bulk of the constellation. So, and if we go over here, we have the highlight of the evening, in my opinion, is Jupiter and Saturn. Always great objects to see. If you, even in a small telescope, you can make out the bands of Jupiter and its 4 moons. You can even make out the 4 moons if you have a good pair of binoculars and a steady hand, or have them mounted on a tripod. I have never been able to see the moons of Jupiter through a pair of binoculars when I'm holding them, because I just shake too much. But if I put them on a tripod, I can see them. And then Saturn with a small, even in a small telescope, even in the cheapo telescopes that we tell people not to buy, you can see the rings or the ring. Although you may have a little trouble finding it with those cheap telescopes, they shake so much. But if you ever manage to get it in the field of view, you will be able to see the ring, even in a department store telescope. So let's follow these guys through the month. And here, just going to shift that over a bit. And as okay, there's a conjunction of the Saturn and the Moon on the 22nd. I have that noted further on. And they are getting lower and lower as the month progresses. And on by the end of the month, they're still well above the horizon, but they are getting lower and lower. One thing to look for in the month of December is there will be an extremely close conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. Now let's go over and watch Mars here for a little bit. Just going to go back to the beginning here. Okay. Okay, on October 1st, Mars is rising tomorrow. It's going to rise at 7:49. And it will get steadily higher throughout the month at the same time. Sky gets a little darker. There's Taurus starting to come up. I should note that on the 6th, Mars is closest to the Earth, as it will be for the next 26 months, actually. And hang on here. Sorry. Right, and it's at opposition on the 13th, which means it is in a direct line between the Sun, the Earth, and Mars are all lined up in a straight line. And after that, Earth will pass Mars in its orbit and draw further and further away. But Mars is going to remain fairly bright in the sky until well into December. And I went too far there, sorry. Let's see if I got anything. Oh, Uranus is in opposition on the on Halloween. Now, getting back to the three bright planets, on October the 1st, Jupiter sets at 10:54, Saturn sets at 11:29, Mars sets at 9 a.m. in the morning. At the end of the month, Jupiter's setting at 10:12, Saturn's setting at 10:41, and Mars is setting at 6:21 in the morning. Now, I think that's all for the starry night. So, are there any questions before I go any further here? Any terms I've used? Maybe no one. Questions at all? No? Okay. All right, I'll go back to my PowerPoint here.
What do you see when you look at the moon? When it's full and round, do you see a balloon? Does it look like a cookie with the bite taken out? What do you see when you look at the moon?
Okay, so the phases of the moon in October. October the 1st is the full moon, also known as the harvest moon. Now, a lot of times people think the September full moon is the harvest moon, but it's actually the full moon closest to the equinox. And last month, the full moon in September was right at the beginning of the month. So the October 1st full moon is officially or unofficially the harvest moon. Reaches third quarter on October the 9th. On October the 16th, it's new, so you won't be able to see it. First quarter is on the 23rd of October. And then, as a special bonus, we have 2 full moons in October, known as the Hunter's Moon. It's also known as the Dying Grass Moon, for obvious reasons, as we are reaching the end of the summer, going into the fall, just before the snow falls. Now, normally, after this section, I point out a feature on the moon that we can see. But today I'm going to talk about a couple names for the moon, which are become fairly popular in the last few years. So, first one.
Bomb, 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 dang, 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 ding, it on, ding, blue moon, 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 blue moon, dip, 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 moon, moon, blue moon, dip, 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 moon, moon, blue moon, dip, 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 bomb, 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 dang, 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 ding, it on, ding, blue moon,
Okay. I can't turn it. It's going to fade out. All right. The term once in a blue moon means once in a very, very long while. Now, I have never seen a blue moon. When the moon does turn blue, it's the result of dust or smoke or volcanic ash in our atmosphere. Like I said, I've never seen, and it scatters light, so it looks blue. Now, I've never seen a blue moon. I guess the closest thing I could think of was the total lunar eclipse in 1992. Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines had erupted that year and dumped a whole bunch of ash into our atmosphere. And normally during a total eclipse, the moon turns orange or red. People sometimes call it the blood moon. But that year, the moon disappeared completely. It was completely black because of all the dust, all the ash in our atmosphere. Now, in popular culture, we started using the term blue moon for 2 full moons in a month, and it seems to have originated in an article in Sky and Telescope magazine back in 1946. And it seems that someone misinterpreted something that was written in the Farmer's Almanac, either that year or a few years before. And so they started referring to 2 full moons in a month as a blue moon. There was an astronomy program in the United States called Stardate that aired on the radio, and they started using it in the term blue moon for 2 full moons in a month in 1980. And just so it would stick, it became a question in the Trivial Pursuit game in 1986. So which I would say, I'll take astronomical misquotes for 1,000, Alex. Okay, next name of the moon is the supermoon. Now, I've railed against the supermoon for a while because maybe because of its origin, and it was cooked up in 1976 by an astrologer who described a full moon at or near perigee. The moon's orbit is elliptical. It is not the same distance. It's not round, so its distance varies from the Earth as it goes around our planet. Now, technically, there is a supermoon every month, but it's only used when it's a full moon. There's a supermoon every month because every month the moon will be at perigee to the Earth. Also, if it's perigee, it will also be at apogee. It will be furthest from the Earth. So I hear people on the radio say, "Oh, go out and look at the moon. It's going to look really big, you know." And maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I can't really see a difference. You know, I did take this picture during a supermoon, and it does look kind of big only because I included the top of a tree in my neighbor's yard to give it a little bit of perspective. And so there it is. Now, I've also done a little experiment with my camera, even though I'm not much of a photographer. But I took pictures of the moon in 2017. I think it was in July when it was at near apogee, furthest from the Earth. And then I took a picture of it sometime in 2018 when it was at perigee, and using the identical equipment. And so there you see, that's the difference between a supermoon and a not so supermoon. And the average one would be somewhere in the middle. Now, I think before the age of photography, I don't think anyone would ever really notice, because in order to compare the size of something, you need something to compare it with. And the only thing to compare a moon with is another moon. And of course, we only have one. Now, why am I going on about the supermoon? Well, on October 21st, or 31st, I should say, the full moon it's near apogee, and it is the smallest full moon of the year. So rather than a supermoon, I'm going to call it the Clark Kent moon. And as the moon is full on Halloween, I don't know what trick-or-treating is going to be like, but it might be worthwhile watching to see if there's anything up spooky going on the moon. Okay, last month we were messing around in the summer triangle, which ironically is best viewed in autumn. And last month I talked about Lyra, constellation Lyra, and a couple items you can see in Lyra. Today I'm going to talk about, there's the summer triangle, by the way, with the three bright stars, Vega, Altair, and Deneb. So I'm going to talk about the constellation Cygnus, which contains the bright star Deneb, which is right there, and there's Lyra down there we talked about last month with Epsilon Lyra there, and then the Ring Nebula over here. So Cygnus is the swan. There's the tail, this is the head. So we're going to talk about the head first. If you have a telescope of reasonable quality, and if you look at this star, Albireo, in the head, you will find it's actually two stars. Now this picture doesn't give it justice, but to the naked eye, this star here is actually it's quite orange, orangey, almost red, and this star here is blue. It's a favorite object that we show at the RASC Observatory in Coronation Park in the fall. Deneb right now is almost straight overhead, or pardon me, Cygnus right now is almost straight overhead. You can't miss it. You can't miss seeing the triangle either, even in light polluted skies of Edmonton. Now, I promised a second object. So this is just a picture I took of Cygnus. There's Deneb. There's the wings of the swan right there. And Albireo is actually, I can't see it in my view because the tiles are in the way, but Albireo is right there, the head of the swan. So I took this picture, just opened my shutter on my camera, left it open for about 15 seconds to catch this picture. And the reason I took this picture is because it's something I would show my kids when they were little, or my friends when they would come over, and they would look up and they would say, not many stars up there. Because really the only ones you can really easily see are the swan and a few other assorted ones. But I would give them a pair of binoculars and I'd say, now look, because the Milky Way goes right through Cygnus. So I took this same picture and I did a little enhancement. Now this picture really even doesn't do justice to what you see with the naked eye. You can see a lot more stars with the naked eye, but this was only a 15-second exposure. But there are a lot of stars in the constellation Cygnus because, like I said, the Milky Way goes right through Cygnus. So something you can impress your friends with some night. Take them outside, point out the summer triangle, point out Cygnus, give them a pair of binoculars and say, look at look up at Cygnus and see how many stars you can see. Okay, so other highlights this month. We got the moon and Mars with a very close conjunction on October the 2nd, and I showed that with the starry night, just 1.5 degrees apart. Mars is closest to the Earth on October the 6th, and it's at opposition on the 13th. There is a conjunction of Jupiter, Saturn, and the moon on the 22nd. We have 2 meteor showers this month. The Draconids, which come out of the constellation Draco, on October the 8th. Now, this is one, most meteor showers, we tell people they're best after midnight, but this one is a little different. It's actually best in just after evening twilight. Now, the meteor count on the Draconids is pretty low, 5, 8 meteors an hour, but sometimes it surprises. Draconids originate from the comet Jacobini-Zinner, which has a 6.6 year period. And there have been reports in past years where the Earth passes right through the center of, I should explain to people who don't know. Meteor showers are caused by the Earth passing through the debris left behind by passing comets. So, and some years the Earth passes right through the center of that stream, and there have been reports of hundreds or even 1,000 meteors seen in an hour, although for a very short period of time while it passes through the densest part of the stream. And then we have the Orionids, which peak on October the 21st, and that one you have to look after midnight because the radiant, the point where the meteors seem to originate, is in the constellation Orion, and Orion is below the horizon pretty much before midnight. So if you go out in the early evening, you're not going to see anything as far as Orion and meteors. And this is a favorite target of mine, the Lunar X, which is a transient feature visible on the moon just before first quarter. It only lasts about 4 hours. So although somewhere on Earth it's visible every month, it's only visible here every 2 or 3 months. So starting around 7:35 p.m., if you go out with a small telescope and look along the terminator, that's the area between where the sun is shining on the moon and where it's dark, you will see this X, and it's caused by sunlight shining on the tops of a group of a tightly grouped of craters, and it looks like an X. There's also a lunar V just above it. Okay, now we're going to go into our space history part, which I'm told some people like. I know Alistair's a big fan of it. And for space history, although there is always something in space history, I only pick ones that are either on a 5 or a 10-year cycle. So like, I'm not going to talk about on the moon landing because that happened in 1969, and I won't talk about something 51 years ago or 33 years ago. I'm only going to talk about something that was 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 35, etc. years ago. So, oh, I didn't advance that. Okay. Back in 1965, on April 6th, Intelsat 1, which was known as Early Bird, was launched. Now, this was the very first commercial communication satellite to be placed in geosynchronous orbit. There were other geosynchronous communication satellites launched, but they were government-owned, and most of their service was in the service of the military. And it was launched over the Atlantic Ocean, so it could provide instant communication or television between Europe and the Americas, or the Americas and Europe as it was. And that's kind of about where it was. It's a geosynchronous orbit is an orbit that is along the equator of the Earth, and it's high enough up that it orbits the Earth once every day. So it basically just stays in the same spot in the sky. Um, you don't need to track it. Earlier communication satellites like Telstar or Echo would be launched in long elliptical orbits, and you would have to track them with a dish to keep a lock on them. But this one, you just point the dish at where the satellite is, and you're good to go. Now, back in those days, the communication satellites were very low power, so you needed these huge dishes to communicate with them. Now, by 1967, June 25th, 1967, there were actually 4 commercial geostationary communication satellites around the world. And on the 25th of June, 1967, I remember this, it was a Sunday afternoon, a group of 14 countries around the world, Canada being one of them, the United States, England, France, Australia, put on a show, and it was called Our World. And it was quite the thing. It had a worldwide audience using these communication satellites, and they would go from one place to the other. I think there were 3 feeds from Canada. I know one of them showed Elaine Tanner, who was, those of us of a certain vintage will remember her. They called her Mighty Mouse. She was a swimmer for Canada. Anyway, one of the highlights, and the one that gets remembered most from this broadcast, is this little clip here of an obscure band from England making a record.
This is Steve Race in the Beatles recording studio in London, where the latest Beatle record is at this moment being built up. Not just a single performance, but a whole montage of performances. With some friends in to help the atmosphere, this is quite an occasion.
All you need is love. All you need is love. Love. Love is all you need. All you need is love. All you need is love. All you need is love. Love. Love is all you need. Love is all you need. Love is all you need. Love is all you need.
Okay, Richard, that'll do. You can kill it. Right. Oh, that's very good. Thank you, John. That's fine. I think that will do for the vocal backing very nicely. We'll get the musicians in now, and we'll do the last step.
Oh, great.
Okay. And that, of course, was George Martin, their producer. So, now, when I talk about spacecraft, I always like to show a picture of the spacecraft when with people in front of it, so you can see how big or how little these things were. And this is Intelsat 1, which was launched in 1965. Not very big at all compared with how big communication satellites are now. And here's one being grabbed on STS-49 by 3 astronauts. This was a communication satellite that was launched on an expendable rocket, but the upper stage failed, and it was stranded in a orbit that was no good. So they sent the shuttle up to grab it. And they tried to do it with a fancy bar, but it didn't work. So they coordinated 3 astronauts. It's the only time that I know of that 3 astronauts have done an EVA at the same time. And they literally grabbed this thing as it was spinning above the shuttle. And they attached an upper stage to it and launched it. As far as I know, it's still in service. The satellites now are huge. They have lots of power, and you don't need a big dish to pick up a satellite signal. This is the dish on my neighbor's house. So why am I talking about satellites and communication satellites? It's not in October 65. It's not 1967. Am I breaking my own rules? Well, not really, because I'm going to go back all the way to October 1945, when an article in a British magazine, Wireless World, Radio and Electronics, written by this guy, Arthur C. Clarke, talked about in an age where the only rockets people were familiar with were the V-2s, which were launched against London. He talked about putting satellites in geostationary orbit for communication purposes, and this was, as far as we know, the very first time that anyone had come up with the idea of doing that. And of course, it took 20 years for that to happen, but I can't imagine life without communication satellites now. I mean, we take everything so much for granted. I mean, we watch the Olympics from the other side of the world live via satellite. In the old days, like the Rome Olympics, for example, they literally had to load the film or the tape or whatever into a jet and fly it across the Atlantic for broadcast over here. I mean, they just did not have the technology. So communication satellites have made our life just infinitely better. We have satellite phones now. So that is why I picked an article in a magazine for my history in space this month. So just a reminder, Heavens Above is a great resource for just about anything astronomical. It'll give you set and rise times of the planets, the moons. It'll give you satellite pass times. If you want to look at the ISS, unfortunately we missed the one tonight. It was at 8:01. Just anything you care to want to see, it's on Heavens Above. And they're not paying me for that either. So with that, I will say thank you very much and ask if there are any questions.
Thank you so much. This is Jasleen. Thank you so much. I really appreciated learning all of that. This is the first one of these that I've attended.
Oh, well, thank you for coming.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. I'm in downtown Edmonton, so I can't see very many stars most of the time, but right outside my window, there's a very bright star all the time, almost due south, but quite high up in the sky. And I thought it was maybe Jupiter, but that looked much lower on the horizon.
Yeah, the planetarium program is a little deceptive. It looks lower on the planetarium program, but it's actually quite a ways up. But I mean, if you watch it over time, it's going to get lower and lower.
Right.
Yeah. If it was fairly bright and it's in the south, I would say it's probably Jupiter, because there really isn't any other really bright stars right now. And also Saturn is right beside it. It'll be a fainter one. You can still see it from downtown, though.
Yeah, I can see a second bright star next to it and have for the last few nights. So
that would be Saturn, yes.
Oh, good. Well, thank you.
Anybody else?
Jeff, one thing I might want to add to that is if she can see whether it's actually twinkling or not.
Oh, yes. Yes, stars twinkle, planets tend not to twinkle unless the atmosphere is really disruptive, because stars are just a point of light, where a planet will be a disk and it has a greater area, so it won't twinkle.
That was actually one of the clues that I was using. Thank you.
Sorry, I had to have a drink of water, although I was thinking maybe I would use this next time and get people really wondering.
Quick question about meteor showers.
Yes.
Is it worth, like the brighter ones obviously will be visible in the city. Is it, do you get a whole bunch of extra ones by going out to a darker site?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Or nearby there? Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, you'll see a lot more meteors out of town than you will in town. I mean, even a relatively bright meteor shower like the Perseids. I mean, if it's during the work week and I don't want to drive out, I'll just sit in my backyard and I might see 15, 20 an hour if I'm lucky. But if I went out of town, I could see 40, 50, 60, or even more an hour, because you'll see the fainter ones.
Right.
And plus, if you pick a good spot, you're not dealing with your neighbor's house or his trees and all this other stuff too. Block your view.
Right. Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Could also add that the moon will wash out a lot of meteors if it's bright like it is now.
Oh yes, I forgot to mention the moon. I'm sorry. Let's see here. I'm just going to flip my calendar over here. So on the the moon's kind of in the way for the Dracids. It's 21st. Yeah, it's before first quarter, so it'll still be up after midnight, but it'll be lower, if that's any help. But it's not like you're going to be fighting under a full moon or a gibbous moon. Anything else? No? Okay. Well, thanks everybody. I will do some editing, take out some of my mistakes, and this will be up on our YouTube channel in a few days. Just go to YouTube and search under RASC Edmonton and you'll find us. You can look at some of the older ones. I think some of Alistair's introduction to stargazing are up there too, as well as some of our general meetings. So if there's nothing else, I will say good night, and once again, thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. Well done.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
All right. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.